In this panel, we are going to primarily talk about how do we build or how do we build this collaborative approach of working with various partners towards ensuring that our children are safe inside their education institutions. So our primary focus is safety inside educational institutions, and how do we strengthen various actors who come into play when we talk about child safety. So as I was thinking about this, I thought one of the things that we should first start off with is really discussing this word that I think we've been hearing a lot, which is a culture of safety. What do we really mean by culture of safety for our children inside schools? So I'm going to actually ask Dr. Shekhar to start us off with painting a vision for culture of safety. What, when as educators, as institution builders, as leaders, we think of culture of safety inside our educational institutions, what are we really talking about? And what is your personal vision for safety of children?
Mainak, I think I'd like to sort of predicate my response on another culture that I'd like to allude to, which is the nature of the relationship of adults with children, whether it's a parent in a child system or a teacher in a student system. And my submission to you, friends, is that the culture of this relationship is actually a culture of instruction, expectation, control, and obedience, and not a culture of conversations. So, if you ask me for a frame of reference, the first arm of that frame of reference is, can we really build a culture of conversations? And can we change this whole power structure that exists between adults and children? The second frame of reference uh, is actually about the responsivity of a school system, because safety is a very generic construct. And I know when Lena conceptualized this event, while we have a certain focus on abuse and sexual abuse, but safety has a much larger construct. It is also keeping the identity of a child as safe. And I recall discussing with Sonali and Mansi before the program started. It's about the 6-year-old child who comes into the class and sees his teacher with a look of enthusiasm and says, "Good morning, teacher." And the teacher looks at the child and just does something like that. And you switched on in the child a whole set of questions. Does she not like me? Did I do anything to offend him? Will he always dislike me? Oh God, what do I do now? Uh, so safety from the kind of injuries that a child can experience in terms of identity, on the one hand, and the kind of abuse that children who come from vulnerable circumstances of adverse childhood experiences, and how does a teacher actually read signs in a classroom situation, is the second frame of reference. The third actually refers to the kind of skills that a teacher needs to have, essentially because children spend so much of time in schools. Um, and so if there is a trauma informed school system, this is not just about teaching your subject. That is an awareness and understanding of childhood trauma and adverse experiences and how they manifest in school spaces. So it involves the understanding of emotional, behavioral learning problems that we see in children and how they are influenced by their circumstances and the way they make meaning of these circumstances and internalize them. So every childhood behavior, whether it is a withdrawn child in school or a VP child or a child who's doing well is suddenly not doing well, or a child who's absent in unexplained ways. Uh, Behind every behavior, there is an emotion. Behind every emotion, an inner voice. Behind every inner voice, an experience. And behind every experience, a context. So, how do you uh, imbue schools as spaces where some of these manifest problems are addressed and a supporting environment actually created? The last frame of reference, therefore, is the ability of a teacher to repair regulatory abilities for children, to repair attachment disruptions by providing corrective, nurturing, alternate relationships, by learning and building awareness about trauma and its impact, and to provide first level responses. Just like to sort of sum this up by the story that I'm often fond of saying, and that's the last thing I want to say as an opening statement. So, this 37-year-old techie comes back to school and goes to meet his teacher who's on the verge of retirement, and goes to the teacher and says, "Teacher, do you remember me?" And she kind of looks at him and says, "I'm sorry, I don't." Because he was a cherubic, innocent looking kid, and now he's looks adult and so on. And he says, "But I have not forgotten you. I don't know whether you recall. Came from exceedingly adverse family circumstances. And the truth is, I've not reconciled with my family, and I somehow managed to negotiate the school system. And I'm in the US now, just about on the verge of getting my citizenship. Actually, he won't because Trump has changed all the rules. But that's a different story. He said, I don't know what you noticed one day when things were particularly bad at home. And I still remember you did me the dignity of calling me aside very quietly, not in front of other children to say, "What's the matter with you? Why are you so silent today?" But you called me aside quietly and said, "Child, you look a little out of sorts. Is anything the matter?" And I told you what had transpired that morning. And it's not that you did anything fabulous, but you just said it must have been so difficult to keep all this inside of you. I'm happy you told me, and please don't hesitate to come to me if you wish to discuss or share some stuff. And if there's something conceivably that I can do to assist you, I would be happy and honored to do so. And teacher, I have never ever forgotten that act of kindness. So the school as an ecosystem, um, and also Mainak, it's kind of reminds me of also what is happening in Kota. Children coming, carrying their expectations from all over the country, and there are heartbreaking letters of the 14 or 15 suicides that have occurred saying, "Mummy, Papa, mujhse hoga nahi." Now, I call this as the tyranny of expectations, and existing in an ecosystem that does not provide them with the kind of safety that they require for their well being. So, in short, friends, the whole concept of safety extends to a brusque response to an enthusiastic child who greets you, switching on a whole anxiety and terror about whether you're disliked by the teacher, to bullying experiences in school, to a tough teacher, to witnessing violence or experiencing violence, to forms of abuse that you may experience. So that's the frame of reference that I wanted to start off with. And I have lots more to say, but perhaps later.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I think thank you for really setting the context of what do we really mean by a culture of safety. I want to move to Vaibhav. And Vaibhav, through your work with Safe Society, you have you directly work with children, right? I want to go back to what Shekhar mentioned about context and experiences. So you definitely work with children from adverse contexts who come from different like adversities. Uh, I want you to maybe tell us a little bit about some of the intentional experiences that you create as a part of your work at Safe Society, which enables children to feel safe, to feel like this is a space that cares about us.
Okay, thank you. So, before I start answering your question, I just want to one thing कि जब मैं डॉक्टर सांग को सुन रहा था तो आई वॉज वेरी वंडरिंग कि सेफ्टी का जो डेफिनेशन व्हाट वी आर डिस्कसिंग हियर कि व्हाट सेफ्टी शुड बी, इज इट अप्लीकेबल फॉर द चिल्ड्रेन हु आर स्टडिंग इन द गवर्नमेंट स्कूल ऑफ यूपी बिहार एंड एमपी आल्सो? क्या वहाँ के टीचर, क्या वो पेरेंट्स इतने कभी भी इतनी इस स्तर पे या कब उस स्तर पे सेंसिटिव हो पाएंगे? वी आर वर्किंग विद द चिल्ड्रेन हु आर connected with the Musar community from nomadic community and living on the streets. और जब वो बच्चे स्कूल्स में जाते हैं तो टीचर का फर्स्ट रिस्पॉन्स यही होता है कि ठीक है ये तो उसका है, उस कास्ट का है, इसको उधर उधर बैठाओ उधर. तो दिस इज द सिचुएशन, एक्चुअल सिचुएशन इन द ग्राउंड. एंड सेकेंड वन मोर इम्पॉर्टेंट थिंग कि द एक्सपेक्टेशन ऑफ द पेरेंट्स इन आवर कंट्री, इन एवरीवेयर, कि जो पेरेंट्स का एक्सपेक्टेशन है फ्रॉम आवर चाइल्ड इज़ वेरी हायर. वो सोचते हैं कि सबका बच्चा आईएएस बने, प्रधानमंत्री बन जाए. बट जब हम वो गांव में जाते हैं तो शायद वो पेरेंट्स का जो एक्सपेक्टेशन है उतना नहीं है, बट उनका भी थोड़ा है. तो इट्स वेरी बिग गैप कि सेफ्टी और चाइल्ड को जो सेफ फील होगा स्कूल में या अपने घर में, ये दोनों का जो सिचुएशन है, कैसे वो सेफ्टी हम एक्चुअल में उनको फील करा पाए, वो एक बड़ा चैलेंज है. और उस चैलेंज को लेके हम लोगों ने पिछले 2015 टू 2018 एक बड़ा स्टडी किया था, द चिल्ड्रेन हु आर रनिंग अवे फ्रॉम देयर होम, व्हाई दे आर रनिंग अवे फ्रॉम देयर होम, व्हाट इज द प्रॉब्लम, व्हाट इज द चैलेंज. सो वी गॉट वेरी अलार्मिंग थिंग्स. जब बच्चों से बात किया कि आप क्यों निकल के आ रहे हैं घर से, क्या प्रॉब्लम है, क्या महसूस हुआ आपको घर पे, तो वन इज़ वेरी अलार्मिंग थिंग्स कि एक मम्मी थी, एक दो बच्चियाँ थीं, दोनों 1 साल 1.5 साल का अंतर रहा होगा दोनों के एज में, और घर से 4-4 रोटियां लेके वो लोग निकले थे. दोनों के पास 4-4 रोटियां थी. और गोरखपुर रेलवे स्टेशन पे हम लोग को मिले थे, हमारे टीम के लोगों को. और जब उनसे बात किया गया कि क्या प्रॉब्लम था बेटा, क्यों आप आ गए, अभी तो आपकी एज मुश्किल से एक की 9 साल, एक की 10 साढ़े 10 साल रही होगी. तो उन्होंने बोला कि मेरी मम्मी कहती है कि तुम लोग इतने बड़े हो गए हो, स्कूल जाओ. और हम लोग जब स्कूल में जाते हैं तो जो हमारे टीचर हैं वहाँ पे सब मेल टीचर हैं, फीमेल टीचर कोई नहीं है. वो लोग कहते हैं कि तुम लोग इस कास्ट के हो, तुम लोग स्कूल क्यों आते हो, तुम्हें तो स्कूल आना ही नहीं चाहिए. और जब हम स्कूल में बैठते हैं पढ़ने तो हमारे जो टीचर हैं वो रिवॉल्वर लगा के आते हैं, और उस रिवॉल्वर से मुझे डर लगता है. और जो दूसरे टीचर हैं वो गुटखा खाते हैं, और गुटखा खा के वो क्या बोलते हैं समझ में ही नहीं आता है. और हम लोग कुछ बोलते हैं तो हमको पीटना शुरू कर देते हैं. और जब घर पे हमें बात बताते हैं तो मम्मी बोलती है नहीं तुम स्कूल जाओ, स्कूल में तुमको शिक्षा मिलेगी, क्योंकि हम लोग नहीं पढ़ पाए, तुम लोग पढ़ो. तो अगर हम नहीं पढ़ पाए, हमारा बच्चा पढ़े, दिस इज द गुड इंटेंशन, बट जब हम स्कूल में जा रहे हैं तो वहां का सिचुएशन ये है. तो वो बच्चा फ्रस्ट्रेट हो गया, और फ्रस्ट्रेट होकर वो कहा कि हम लोग चलो कहीं चलते हैं. और 9-10 साल की बच्चियां इतना बड़ा स्टेप ले सकती हैं. तो दिस इज द वन सिचुएशन बट आई एम शेयरिंग हियर कि जो हम चाइल्ड सेफ्टी सोच रहे हैं ना, ये शायद हो सकता है कि हम दूसरे बोर्ड्स में या दूसरे स्टेट्स में इंडिया में सोच रहे हों, बट ऐसे भी स्टेट्स हैं, ऐसे भी स्कूल्स हैं, ऐसे भी जगह हैं जहाँ पे ये सोचना भी गुनाह है. अभी हम उससे बहुत नीचे हैं.
No, I think completely, Vaibhav, I agree with you. And I think मैं हमेशा ये एक चीज़ पे बिलीव करता हूँ, दिस कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ ट्रूथ एंड होप. द ट्रूथ इज दैट हमारे बहुत सारे बच्चे, एंड टेक्निकली majority of our kids or children are facing situations like जो आपने अभी कहा, हम सबके साथ साझा किया. But my personal hope is that we will have teachers who are more intuitive, who are more loving, who are more skilled. And I think one of the reasons we've all gathered here today is also to see कि हम उस दिशा में कैसे क्या कर सकते हैं. सो अगर आप थोड़ा सा वो भी शेयर करो कि सेफ सोसाइटी में जब आप बच्चों के साथ, बच्चे आपके साथ जुड़ते हैं, तो आप वो ऐसा क्या एक्सपीरियंसेस में भी वो दे गो थ्रू विद इन योर वर्क जिससे उनको मे बी एक दे हैव दैट होप ऑफ अ बेटर टुमारो इनसाइड देम.
ओके, श्योर. तो जो आपने कहा कि ऐसे भी टीचर्स हैं जो काफ़ी लविंग है, केयरिंग है, तो नो डाउट मैं उसको एक्सेप्ट करता हूँ, वो है. और वो है तभी हम ये बात सोच भी पा रहे हैं कि ये सिचुएशन होना चाहिए. तो वो एक अच्छी कैटेगरी है, वो हमारे साथ हैं, वो लोग काम कर रहे हैं. और जो दूसरा सिचुएशन है वो मैं ज़्यादा हाईलाइट कर रहा था.
No,
तो इसका
definitely.
मतलब ये नहीं कि वो लोग नहीं है, तो सॉरी अगर ऐसा लगा. बट जो हम लोग कर रहे हैं इन द आवर मॉडल दैट इज कॉल्ड अंत्योदय, अंत का उदय, द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ लास्ट पर्सन, उसमें हम लोग ये करते हैं कि हम एजुकेशन की बात ही नहीं करते हैं कि अगर हमारे सेंटर में बच्चा आ रहा है तो वो पढ़ने आ रहा है. हम कभी भी ना पेरेंट्स से ना बच्चे से उसको ये नहीं बोलते हैं कि आप सेंटर में आइए और पढ़िए. हम उसको बोलते हैं कि आप सेंटर में आइए और खेलिए. और जो टूल्स और टेक्निक हम लोगों ने डेवलप किए हैं दैट इज मोस्टली ड्रिवन बाय आर्ट बेस्ड थेरेपी. आर्ट बेस्ड थेरेपी के थ्रू हम उनसे बातचीत करते हैं, उनके कॉग्निटिव नॉन कॉग्निटिव डेवलपमेंट की बात करते हैं, उनके मोटर स्किल्स की बात करते हैं, उनके पर्सनल की बात करते हैं, उनकी रिवर ऑफ लाइफ को समझते हैं. और इन सब सिचुएशंस को समझते हुए फिर उन बच्चों के साथ एक इमोशनल कनेक्ट, जो कि एक इमोशनल कनेक्ट जब तक हम उनके साथ डेवलप नहीं करेंगे, उनका जो मेंटल ट्रॉमा डेवलप हुआ है, क्योंकि वो सड़कों पे रह के आए हैं, वो ऐसे फैमिली में रह के आए हैं कि जहाँ पे उनको कोई सपोर्ट नहीं मिल रहा है, तो वो मेंटल ट्रॉमा धीरे धीरे रिड्यूस होना शुरू होता है. फिर थोड़ा कुछ फन विथ लर्न एक्टिविटी के थ्रू उनके साथ कुछ एजुकेशनल एक्टिविटी भी स्टार्ट करते हैं. और ये सब करते करते जब वो एक साल में थोड़े इस लेवल पे पहुंच जाते हैं कि दे कैन अडॉप्ट द स्कूल सिस्टम. एंड व्हाट इज द एक्चुअल स्कूल सिस्टम, व्हाट आई हैव सेड अर्लियर, वो वाले में थोड़ा जब वो अपने को फिट पाने की स्थिति में होते हैं तो हम उनको स्कूल भेजते हैं. बट पूरा उनको स्कूल नहीं भेज देते हैं. मॉर्निंग में वो स्कूल आते हैं, फिर हम शाम को 2 घंटे उनके साथ इंटरेक्ट करते हैं. बिकॉज कि जब वो स्कूल जा रहे होते हैं तो अगेन दे आर गेटिंग ए लॉट ऑफ ट्रामा. तो वो ट्रामा रिड्यूस कैसे होगा? अगर हमने फिर उनको छोड़ दिया तो शायद वो ट्रामा, जिसे डॉक्टर साहब अभी कह रहे थे, डॉक्टर शेषाद्री, कि वो बढ़ जाएगा. अगर टीचर ने रिस्पॉन्स नहीं किया अच्छे से तो वो और ज़्यादा बढ़ जाएगा. तो वो ट्रामा कैसे रिड्यूस होगा, उस पर फिर हम 1-2 घंटे उनके साथ बैठते हैं, इंटरेक्ट करते हैं और समझते हैं. उनकी प्रॉब्लम्स जो होती है, उनके जो होमवर्क होते हैं वो सॉल्व करते हैं. फिर उनको धीरे धीरे उस सिचुएशन में उनको रखते हैं. बट मोर इम्पॉर्टेंट थिंग्स यहाँ पे ये है कि हमें जो हमारे अच्छे टीचर हैं, उन्हें जो हमारे दूसरे टीचर हैं, जो दूसरी कम्युनिटी है टीचर्स की, स्टेट बोर्ड्स के, उनके साथ एक डायलॉग इस्टेब्लिश करना चाहिए. मेरा मानना ये है कि जब पीयर सपोर्ट उनको मिलेगा और पीयर ग्रुप में लोगों से बातचीत होगी कि हम ऐसे कर रहे हैं, हम अपने बच्चों के साथ ऐसे डील करते हैं, आप अपने बच्चों के साथ भी ऐसे डील करिए, और इसका रिस्पॉन्स ऐसे आ रहा है, इसका रिस्पॉन्स अच्छा आ रहा है, तो शायद टीचर्स, जो दूसरे टीचर्स हैं, जो इतना सेंसिटिविटी के साथ नहीं बच्चों को डील कर रहे हैं, उनके अंदर वो सेंसिटिविटी जनरेट हो पाएगी. तो ये प्राइमरी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी हम सब यहाँ बैठे हुए लोगों की है कि हम लोग ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा डायलॉग उन टीचर्स के साथ करें जहाँ पे इसकी ज़्यादा नीड है. थैंक यू.
Thank you so much, Vaibhav. So yeah, I think Sanah, I'll sort of move to you, but before that, I also would like all of you to know that we'll be taking questions from you as well in the end. So as you're listening to the panel speak, if you have questions, maybe note it down so that we can bring them up later. So Sanah, I think what we just heard from Vaibhav is, some of the core challenges or the reality of what is actually happening with our children. You don several hats in your work. if you could maybe throw some light into what do you think are the roles of different players like non-profits, government institutions, educational institutions, child right experts, child safety experts. What are the different roles that each one of them maybe can play towards, you know, uh, shifting this reality for our children? एंड अभी वो रोल्स प्ले करने में क्या मुसीबतें या क्या दिक्कतें आ रही है?
Sure. Thank you. So, like we've been discussing, safety is an extremely broad topic. It's very easy to say have a child protection policy in your school, train your teachers, and you've complied with POXO. Um, as a school administrator, it's very hard to put all aspects of a school into play when it comes to safety. So whenever I do trainings with schools or I handhold schools to implement certain POXO policies or any other laws in place, I always tell them it's an overall of your entire vision and mission. It's not just putting in a policy. So coming to different collaborations and partnerships, I think first and foremost is having a good collaboration with your parent community. Having your parent body on board with the school is of prime importance, because whatever you enforce in a school, however you are with your kids, like sir mentioned, how the teacher responds when a student walks into a classroom, all of that, all those safe practices have to be reinforced at home as well. Because the biggest problem we face, even in urban cities like ours as Delhi or Bombay, whatever is being taught or learnt at school, it's completely different at home. We talk about non discrimination, we talk about safe practices, we talk about speaking with, even, for example, our domestic staff at home. But what kids may see at school, in their homes, is very different. So, having proper collaboration with parents, bringing your parent body on board and understanding about safety. So, even for my sessions, whenever I'm with a school, we not only train teachers, but we do sensitization for parents, because parents need to understand what their role is in the entire safe structure setup. Second, I feel is so at FICCI, when we developed our child protection policy and our manual for child protection in schools in India, we did a study about what are the different manuals that are out there. And there are surprisingly many. So, when schools say, I don't know how to have a child protection policy, that's, I think, maybe just not knowing what's there. There are policies by MOE, there are manuals by NCPCR, there are manuals by DOE, there are manuals by the disaster management bodies. So, there are N number of manuals. But when we studied them, we saw one, they're extremely lengthy, they go into thousands of pages. Two, they did not provide simple actionables for a school. How do you develop that child protection policy? You could have easily just provided a template. Or when a child comes to you and discloses any incident of abuse, what is the first step that you need to do? When do you inform the police? How do you comply with POXO? So at FICCI, what we did, we studied all these manuals and we created a ready reckoner. It's literally 30 pages and some of it is annexures. So you can literally bring it down to 20. And I got it studied and read by my own school principal. That is this something that you think as a principal it can be implemented? Do you understand it? So what we also did was we gave a lot of annexures. For example, if you're going to sit and have your POXO committee meeting to address a child abuse case, how and what are the minutes of the meetings you should have? So we gave a template for that. We gave a template for a child protection policy. We gave a template for when a counselor has to ask questions to the child, because the nature of questioning has to be so proper that the child doesn't feel vulnerable or scared. It shouldn't instill anything in the child, especially when you're questioning about abuse. So we gave a template of good questions that a counselor could have. Then third, I feel, is proper collaboration with, of course, bodies like you have, that help the schools with doing proper training and development. Teacher training is very, very important when it comes to implementation of laws like POXO, Juvenile Justice Act, etc. Because many schools I work with don't even know how to, firstly, report, and secondly, when should you report. POXO has this gray area in the law. there is no clarity on when you are supposed to report. So as a school, they think, and there has been a Chhattisgarh High Court case on this, where the principal was informed at 7:30 in the morning that a child has been abused in the school. He said, okay, I'm going to maybe look at CCTV footage, take the time, take the day, and within 12 hours he was arrested for non-compliance and non-reporting under 21. So there has to be certain, for a school, schools are busy, schools, there's so many multiple things they're dealing with. So I think just actionables, if that could, proper agencies for training, actionables, and of course now with NCRT, we are developing a legal literacy manual. So helping students understand what is safety, what is safe touch, what is good touch. So I feel with all these stakeholders, parents, NGOs helping with training and development for teachers, students, parents, working with other boards as NCRT, and developing good context and curriculum for students where we can understand safety as a more holistic setup.
Awesome. Thank you. No, I think some very, very strong insights, and I think it also builds a smooth segue to the next part, which is where I would love for Shalini ji to come in. And if you could,
I just want to respond very quickly to two things
Yeah.
here. In light of what was said, this is with particular reference to school. For those of you who are not aware, since I was in the drafting committee of the law, not the procedural part, which is really Anant's domain, but not the substantive part, which is Anant's domain, but the procedural part. What we gave to the government, Anant, is not the law that the government did its own number. ये mandatory reporting is हमने नहीं लिखा था. They did their own number.
Good that you clarify.
Yeah. So please understand, the draft that we gave is not the law as it exists. Now, so we have a paper which I'm willing to share with you about the dilemmas of mandatory reporting where schools are concerned. It's an 8-step process, and as has been pointed out, it's not that a child discloses to you and within the next 2 seconds you have to report. The law does not state that. But your intention to report needs to be, there's a documentation process, and there are certain SOPs that one has to follow, which schools are usually not aware of. And that's the kind of work that many people present here and the organizations that they ably represent actually do in terms of empowering schools and people who run schools to do this kind of work. The other point I wanted to make is this business about this entire focus on this touch business. And I'm sick and tired of this touch business, because to place an onus of a young child, particularly young children, and the reason I'm saying this, as a woman, you know what a good touch and a bad touch is. It doesn't prevent a creep from trying to feel you up. So it's too much to expect a young child to be able to make this discernment, especially if a word that Lena hates, which is the word grooming, if there is a process by which there isn't force or coercion, how is a child supposed to, make out that this experience is something that you can object to? You don't have a basis on which to really judge that something is inappropriate. So I think a lot depends on how a school system actually responds to a child's naive and innocent disclosure about what the child thinks is a game, but actually it isn't. So it's that kind of nuanced alertness on the part of, especially
Absolutely.
if you're talking about sexual abuse.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one core thing, right? That with what you started, when you started talking about the vision for culture of safety, we did cover things where I think the whole sexual offences part is a subset of the larger piece on safety for our children. And I think it's often very easy to just fall into this one domain and keep going deep there while not looking at the other pieces, which then become causes for children feeling vulnerable inside schools. So I think I want to go to Shalini here and ask you a little bit about, can you share with us if an educational institution is starting to think about protection and safety uh, of its students and of children inside the institution, uh, what are all the different things that institutions need to start thinking about as they are, like Sana also said, like as they are creating their own, almost like own policy or their own digest of safety inside the school or inside the educational institution, what are all the things that they need to really focus on?
So I think I'll just take it from other people also whom they have talked about. So I think in terms of safety, it is more about the power equation also. We should understand that the deep-seated patriarchy and the social system in which we operate. So things which have been designed for probably outside world may or may not work over here. Probably it has to be tweaked for what has to work over here. And similarly, when we are talking about safety, I will talk about the evidence based thing in terms of, because I come with the research thing and I feel that what is happening is most of the data sets do not capture many of the things. It's like NCRB does not capture, NFHS does not capture. We capture about ACER, we talk about the academic progress of the school, but there is no other compliance for the school to say that okay, I have also done point A, point B, point C, and I should also be given marks for that. Schools are not given marks for that. Schools are only given marks for their academic performances. They are not given marks for their other things which are there. Sports, yes, now probably a very small percentage which is coming up because it also brings glory to them. So otherwise, I think there is nothing which captures that unless and until there is no strong monitoring compliance mechanism for the schools. Even for mandatory reporting, I think it's a very controversial thing because again the power comes in. So who has the power of whom to have this mandatory reporting becomes, sometimes a little dilemma for if the school is very powerful, then the student does not have any say in the mandatory reporting. If the student is very powerful, then school does not have, because there are times when there are. And similarly, I would also like to talk about, like, it's a voluntary, we have good, like she said, there are a lot of good manuals, there are a lot of good guidelines, there are a lot of things, but they are all voluntary. They are not that you have to implement them. They are voluntary. If the school wants, they can do it. If they don't want, they can actually go away with it, because there is nothing to monitor them and nothing also to ask them in terms of their data. So when that is not in place, then it becomes a difficult thing for anybody for do the compliance.
Okay, and if you had to design a guideline, a compliance guideline for a school, what are 3 questions you would ask?
Difficult question to answer. I have to say, you cannot ask 3 questions, but definitely you can ask, like I always say that there are counselors on board. Now, leave the government school, there are hardly any counselors on board in the government school, because they are so tied up with just the teachers itself. Okay, so whether that is there or not. Now, most of the counselors which are on board in the private schools, they only concentrate not in terms of if a child comes for a disclosure, what they do. They mostly talk about if the child is not performing academically, what they should do. So they do not talk about that. There are a lot of things which actually what the child see in the teachers doing it, like what you were saying about it, that that the teacher is behaving in a certain social structure, the other children also follow that. So the power dynamics within children to children is also something which hardly gets actually accounted for. Children to children blackmailing, children to children bullying, children to children ragging, which happens, and it's all starts with the power equation. So I don't think so it's about question, it is about a set of things that
Yeah.
has to go into this.
Okay, great.
But
Yeah.
but at least to begin the process of some kind of reflection and audit if you would permit us to expand it to 5 questions and not 3.
So I think
Does your school have a child protection policy? Child protection policy, वो क्या होता है? Are you aware of POXO, which is constantly mispronounced as POSCO? POXO, वो क्या होता है? Do you have counselors in the school? Yes, you do. Do you have an SOP if a child reports bullying or feeling unsafe? And can you give us examples of how the school has responded in the case an event of this nature has occurred? These are some of the principles of audit that one uses to make schools aware, or at least conscientizes them about the whole issue of safety
Yeah.
and the legal frameworks and ramifications under which these safety processes actually play out.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Anant would contribute to the interstitials of what I'm alluding to, because if you look at the law and what the law says about putting systems in place in childcare institutions, for example,
Yeah.
that if we have not spoken about abuse that occurs in school by the staff of a school, which, if you look at the expanded definition under POXO, Anand, you can correct me if is aggravated abuse. You're supposed to be looking after the well-being of children. You have no business to be, abusing them. So this would constitute aggravated abuse and therefore a higher quantum of punishment.
Yeah. Thank you. You want to add something to that? Okay, great. So I think just if we stay on this topic for a bit, and if you could, maybe in your work as a lawyer, you've interacted with several children who've experienced a lack of safety, have experienced abuse. What are some of the common threads that you see wherever you talk to a child who's gone through this experience? What are some of those common perceptions of safety or the lack of it that you see in children?
Right. You started on a very gloomy note. I was just thinking that the whole conversation also needs to look at uh, a lot of work on child safety which goes on in school is not noticed because those never make a story. If a school is functioning well, there are no abuse happening, children are happy, hardly any story, hardly any study of how much effort. When there is something which goes wrong, a bad case, 20 year of history of a school, one bad case, the school goes down forever, the institutions go down forever, right? So I just wanted to flag that when we look at what happens to children when things go wrong, we also pay equal attention on what is done so that things don't go wrong.
Yeah.
Right now, you asked me to say about what is the one common pattern I see. So I can just use one word, is trauma, right? And trauma everywhere. And the world which I see from where I stand, the school traumatized, the school principal traumatized, because what she's concerned about her school's reputation going down, right? Then parents traumatized because the school principal is aggressive. Child probably most traumatized because the child suddenly doesn't know who he or she can turn to, because here is mama, here is mama's friend, here is school principal, here is my friend with whom I was playing yesterday. So, trauma is the word which just comes up in the whole scenario, and people just go completely lost on what to do. That's how cases come to me. I'll tell you three stories just to expand the discussion on safety. There was a girl who was given a bicycle in Orissa to go to school, and the girl used to just walk holding the cycle, right, to the school. Everybody thought she doesn't know how to ride a bicycle, but the fact was that she did knew how to ride a bicycle. is just that she could not ride the bicycle because a girl riding a bicycle would subject her to so much of ridicule in the community. Everybody will laugh at her, boys will harass her because girls don't ride a bicycle in her village. So she couldn't throw the cycle, but she had to carry the bicycle just by walking, right? For her, repeating this every day, going to school, had nothing to do with education. It was just pure trauma 2 times a day. That she can't throw the cycle because cycle has been gifted by a local member of parliament. So she has to carry the cycle. But the cycle itself has become a source of so much of humiliation she has to face. There another case I know where, and it's a story from my own school, where one of the most notorious teacher, male teacher, teacher of biology, was in charge of providing sanitary napkins to girls, right? And as a young boy, I felt very humiliated that my female colleagues had to go to this almost, you know, an evil person, and sometimes the girls will, they will request some of us to accompany them, and then we will just go with them and we'll see the kind of interaction which happens there, that smirk, that smile, that conversation, and I still have the memories of that. It creates a huge safety hazard if a school permits that. Then third, I'll say, uh, a child, uh, mostly in semi-urban areas, you have these vendors coming inside the schools to sell items during the break. In uh, uh, prosperous schools, you don't have such system, but in government schools, यूपी, बिहार, मध्य प्रदेश, इन इलाकों में आप देखेंगे तो स्कूल के अंदर लोग आते हैं. There I have a memory of children, khatta mitha churro. There was two people who used to come to the school to sell churran. One guy will have lots of crowd, and the other guy will just keep waiting. Now the trick was that this other guy used to have pornographic pictures on a book, and he will tear that part, put children on that paper, and give it to the boys. That's how the boys will go to buy that 25 paise ka children from that guy, because it's not just children, it's also access to a pornographic material which 12-year, 13-year, 14-year-old boys. So I just want give these examples uh, to just expand the discussion on safety. A lot of children I deal with are also children who got dropped from the school. They stopped going to school because they have to smoke, right? Boys mostly, they have to smoke, and that exposure to smoking leads to bunking the school. The bunking the school puts them into spaces where they should not be, some hidden part of the school, some backyard of the school, and the moment there is no responsible adult oversight, children are prone to all kind of reckless experimentation, which leads them into very dangerous journey into life. That I see quite a lot. Uh, what I will say in in the discourse related to how we view safety, how adults view child safety has nothing to do with how children perceive and feel safety. Uh, a child definitely finds safety in he or she having some say around what's happening, instead of just being treated like a passive recipient of some kind of protection. Children also would like to feel, they feel safe when they have nobody telling them what to do or not to do, right? Freedoms, basically freedoms in person. That's where they feel. The moment you take those away, the sense of safety is gone. You take away the freedom. Now, it's quite opposite to how adults tend to provide care. Adults tend to provide systems which guarantee protection. So they would like to put a CCTV. They would like to have somebody accompanying children everywhere. They would like to put some security guard there. They would like to have some kind of infrastructure changes. Now we are actually uh, dealing with this anxiety of how do we protect children from child protection system created by adults. So now we are living in a time where we have this school system, the education system, and I'm sure many of you will agree that this school system, a, a well-meaning system created for giving education, is scared of child protection system, right? They're so horrified with these laws and with Dr. Shekhar Seshadri coming, Dr. Mr. Asthana coming, telling them law. They don't want. They are so horrified with this child protection system, these policies, put in that scheme, put in that scheme. However, the child protection system has been created with very good intent. Right? That's a crisis, and children have their unique sense of insecurities in both the systems. In education system, very unique challenges, which I just described, had nothing to do with protection as such. But then now we have a child protection system created to cure several uh, uh, malices which have come into education, but the entry is through the child protection stream. Now that itself is a problem. I don't know. I'm not offering any solution at this stage.
No, because I have a question for that. No, thank you. I think in the last about 45 minutes that we've been speaking, I think a couple of things that I feel we've established is one, that the problem and the manifestations are diverse, right? How it shows up in Delhi is very different from how it shows up in Orissa, and even within that, how it shows up for different children is different. So going back to again something that you said, the context, the experiences, and how that defines. So that's one core thing. Then there are several actors in this space. There are educators, there are parents, there are NGOs, there are government institutions, other institutions that do their work. And one thing that I'm definitely taking away is that there are gaps in everyone's functioning in some way or the other. However, like, although the intentions are definitely rooted in the idea of providing safety, but there are gaps. So what I would want all of you to maybe share are what are three most actionable next steps that each stakeholder can take to strengthen child safety measures within their domain. So I would ask Shalini for you to start off, and since you've worked with international organizations and currently work with the government, if you can shed some light on what are three actionable steps that government institutions or individuals like you who directly work with the government can take to ensure, to strengthen child safety from their domain.
I think the first thing is to have a not actionable, but I think there is a lot of thing which Asthana ji was saying that the best performing does not get acknowledged. Similarly, I think there is a lot of trust issue. The school feels the parents should be more responsible. The parents feels the school should be more responsible. So there is a lot of lack of trust in terms of both of them actually coming to the same platform and saying, okay, we will work together. And I think for me, some of the most important thing will be a kind of transparency and accountability. These are the two key words which I will definitely say that is required from the system, which we actually ask from the government also. So we do ask from the government for certain kind of transparency and accountability. I think that should actually extend to other systems too, in terms of what we are looking for. I'm just going to give you one solution.
And as someone working within the government, what is one thing that you feel you can do or someone like you can do to make this happen?
I think, see, when it comes to the government, a lot depends on the political will at that time of election, at that time of who is going to come back. So there is a lot of mixed baggage in terms of working with the government. And also the intention of the that present IS officer, which is also get transferred within 2 months. So with that whole thing together, it is not easy to kind of bring
Absolutely,
something.
yeah.
But what I feel is that what they can bring in terms of scale, which lot of NGOs put together can also not bring. So this is something which definitely government can do if they have a good intention, and if they want, they can definitely do bring some things. I think Dr. Seshadri will talk about his association with the so many state governments, which is looking at the mental health aspect of this whole thing, because I think that is something we are now only talking in terms of exam pressure. We are not talking about and expanding the purview of mental health beyond the exam pressure also.
Thank you. Sana, if you can respond to the same question, but from a point of view of of a trainer or an educator of educators. So from that point of view, if you could respond to the same question.
Okay. So as a trainer or someone who works with
Educators.
schools and other educators, I think one is, like sir also mentioned, what is a child protection policy? So have a correct and proper, understandable, concise, simple policy in place, along with, like we were mentioning, like a checklist. Have your audit systems in place, and not just focusing on sexual abuse. So, for example, when we talk about infrastructure, your washrooms, your labs, talking about disability, being disability friendly, then looking at transportation. We have now seen cases where, though the Supreme Court has guidelines on having female conductors, but even having that, there have been cases of abuse in the buses. So, proper looking at transportation, hygiene, training, digital safety. What can schools do to integrate? Technology is so big in schools now. I mean, the number of players in edtech is, you can't count them today. So, how can you use this tech to help with digital safety in schools? Because online safety has become a major, that's, I think, really the biggest challenge that schools face. So having your policy, having your checklist, I think that's one place where I at least try to handhold schools and get those systems going. Also, because, I mean, just digressing a little bit, this is also where, if I'm looking at it from how a school would protect itself, it also helps the conversation between an accident versus a negligent act. Because I'm also working in the school. So there are times when accidents happen. So how can a school also look at protecting itself? That's when this checklist, the audit, comes into play. And I think second area where I help is with sensitization and training. Teacher training, not only teachers, your staff, your drivers, your conductors, your class 4 employees. All of these people need to, like, for a teacher to understand, it's very rare for a child to go up to a teacher and say, "Ma'am, I have been abused." To form that sentence is, today very difficult. So for a teacher to pick up on those behavioral changes, those behavioral indicators that this child may be going through abuse, and under POCSO, it's not just, for a fact that abuse has happened, you either believe or apprehend that it has happened or may happen, right? So I think proper sensitization, training, and getting all the stakeholders on board, and a multi-prong approach is what some of the actionables I would recommend.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
just add to this that see, UDICE is the platform which gives you a lot of information about the school per se. But again, the UDICE data is that it is not mandatory for all the schools to get registered under that platforms. And there are a lot of schools in India which still work without any kind of board affiliations and anything. So they are independent. So there is nothing that one can actually look into it. Similarly, UDICE captures only the infrastructure part of it: number of teachers, students, toilets, accessible, non-accessible, all those things. But I think unless until UDICE also start putting conditions for other things which requires safety things, then it is just another data set that we will sitting with.
Thank you. Uh,
Mainak,
Yeah.
I actually wanted to build on the point that Anant mentioned about the tension between the school system and the protection system,
Yeah.
and the horrified kind of stuff that. Um about 15 years ago, I was asked by an organization in Bangladesh. I signed a 1 year contract with them to assist them in their work on child sexual abuse. They were a civil society organization, but it has parallels in the school system. And they said, we've been working for many years, but we are not really successful. We'd like you to assist us. And I said, can you tell us what you do? They said, we hold programs for civil society where we give a presentation and then it's time for Q&A. And I said, so what happens during Q&A? And they said there was silence. I said, can you tell me what you do in the presentation? And here is what they did. They'd say, we want to speak to you about child abuse. Children are abused emotionally, physically, and sexually. Children are abused at home. They're abused by known people. They're abused by strangers. They're abused in all kinds of ways. Abuse, abuse, abuse. And it just turns people off with the same kind of horrified response that Anand alluded to, and they turn off and there are no questions to ask. I said, can you split your approach in a way that your entry point in a safety program is not about sexual abuse? Your entry point is, we are here to speak to you about the well being of child and developmental needs of children. Love, nurturance, opportunity, safety, encouragement, affiliation, attachment, sambandh, sampark, sneh, ityadi. Second, under what circumstances are developmental needs of children not met? Perhaps there are family issues, perhaps an incident occurred, perhaps there was abuse. There you said the word. And then you go on into areas where you may get into core aspects of the kind of audit and protection that the law actually demands of us. So the programming of a school safety program needs to keep this in mind, because we mustn't forget that the school system and the teacher system, the principal and the teachers that Anant alluded to, if they come from a position of disbelief that it doesn't occur, it doesn't happen in my school, or they come from a position of belief but not from a position of comfort. I know it exists, but I can't deal with it. Or I need to deal with it, but I don't have the necessary competence or skills. The second point I wanted to make is, it's not merely about the large admin system. It's about the whole ecosystem of the school. And interestingly, I'd done a program for a special needs school, and they wanted me to work with the support staff, not the special educators, not the technical staff, but the support staff. Um, some of you perhaps know that I'm a theatre practitioner, particularly the work of Augusto Boal. And the last book that he wrote was called Aesthetics of the Oppressed. And there is a chapter there called the Prometheus Project, in which there's something called Declaration of Identity. So here was the cook and the cleaner and the security guard. And I asked the guy who was the security guard, Aapki tarif? He said, Sir, main Rakesh. But I persisted to look at him and I said, Aapki tarif. He was a little uncomfortable. Sir, he said, Sir, Rakesh, security guard. आपकी तारीफ सर, मैं राकेश सिक्योरिटी गार्ड में गेट में खड़ा रहता हूँ. आपकी तारीफ सर, मैं राकेश सिक्योरिटी गार्ड गेट में खड़ा रहता हूँ ताकि बच्चे जो आते जाते हैं वो अंदर रहें हिफाजत से. आपकी तारीफ सर, मैं बच्चों को सुरक्षित रखता हूँ. And by which time the rest of them knew that there is something, that you're not just a damn security guard who wants to keep children with challenging behaviors from rushing out. There is a certain sense of identity that is important to keep in mind. And finally, since you asked for points, training and capacity building of all domains in schools to shift from monodisciplinary to transdisciplinary. It's not just so response to a child who discloses is one. A certain knowledge of laws and policies is important. Personal safety programs and making them mandatory as part of the curriculum a reporting process for any form of abuse that parents, teachers, and children are informed about, and creating a repository of services for mental health, child protection, and NGOs that can provide assistance to children and families in the case of abuse and difficulties, because many parents may not have the resources if the problem becomes
Yeah.
legal to actually, so they need that kind of support system which is enabled under the provisions of the law. So that's the kind of frame of reference that I would really suggest.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you've also, through your first example, shared a little bit about, when we are doing some of this work, like of training and everything, what is the approach that we need to take? Shall move to Vaibhav. Vaibhav, I'll ask you the same question, but the role that I want you to sort of think of is as your role as someone who leads a nonprofit. As an individual in that role, what are 3 things that we should do to ensure that we are strengthening our own individual ideas around safety, protection, and each of these pieces?
ओके सो मैं इसमें मेरे प्रीवियस स्पीकर्स ने काफ़ी अच्छे से इसको एक्सप्लेन कर दिया है, तो मैं अनंत जी के और डॉक्टर सांग के बात को लेके आगे बढ़ूंगा। जो अनंत जी ने पहले कहा कि ट्रॉमा इज़ द की, ट्रामा हर स्तर पे है, जैसे पेरेंट्स को भी ट्रामा है, टीचर्स का भी ट्रामा, प्रिंसिपल का ट्रामा, और बच्चे तो खैर ट्रामा में हैं ही। तो डेफिनेटली हमें अगर चाइल्ड सेफ्टी और सिक्योरिटी की बात करना है, चाइल्ड सेफ गार्डिंग की बात करनी है स्कूल्स में और अपने घर में, तो ये जो ट्रामा है इस ट्रामा को रिड्यूस करने पर ही काम करना होगा कि ये ट्रामा हम कैसे रिड्यूस करें, और वो रिड्यूस करके कैसे हम उसको एक सिस्टम, क्योंकि पॉलिसी इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, पॉलिसी होना चाहिए, और पॉलिसी में फिर वो टिक मार्क भी होने चाहिए, और टिक मार्क हो भी जाते हैं। लोग टिक मार्क कर देंगे कि हाँ हमारे वहाँ टॉयलेट है, मेंस्ट्रुएशंस के लिए सैनिटरी पैड हम डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करते हैं, लेकिन वो डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन कैसे हो रहा है वो अनंत जी ने बता दिया। तो जब तक वो सेंसिटिविटी हमारे अंदर क्रिएट नहीं होगी, और उसका एकमात्र तरीका ये है कि हम पेरेंट्स से ही शुरू कर देते हैं कि हर पेरेंट्स को पेरेंट्स बनने की भी ट्रेनिंग दी जा सकती है कि अगर आप पेरेंट्स हैं तो आपके क्या डूज एंड डोंट्स हैं। अगर पेरेंट्स को डूज एंड डोंट्स बताने शुरू किए जाए कि ये डूज हैं, ये डोंट्स हैं, और ऐसे हम लोग अपने बच्चों को पालना शुरू करें, तो शायद ये जो ट्रामा हर लेवल पे डेवलप हो रहा है वो थोड़ा रिड्यूस होगा, और अल्टीमेटली बच्चों का जो ट्रामा है वो भी रिड्यूस होगा। तो आई हैव ओनली वन दिस आइडिया, और इसी पे मैं फोकस करना चाहता हूँ।
नहीं, ये तो मगर मैं आपसे ये भी पूछना चाहता हूँ कि इंडिविजुअली, राइट, क्योंकि जब हम ये काम करने जाते हैं तो हमें भी बहुत सारी नई चीज़ें पता चलती है। आई थिंक एज पीपल वर्किंग ऑन द ग्राउंड देर इज़ अ सर्टन ट्रॉमा आई थिंक ऑफन वी ऑल्सो कैरी विथ अस, एंड ऑब्वियसली जो आपने एक्शन स्टेप्स बताए ये हमें करने चाहिए, बट इंडिविजुअली अपने आप को हम किस तरीके से और सशक्त कर सकते हैं इस जर्नी में बने रहने के लिए?
तो अपने आप को सशक्त करने के लिए तो अपने आप पे ही काम करना पड़ेगा, और अपने आप पे काम करने का मतलब ये है कि जब आप एक बच्चे के साथ डील करने जाते हैं तो आपको ये पता होना चाहिए कि आपकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग उस बच्चे की अंडरस्टैंडिंग में डिफरेंस है, और बच्चे को हमेशा आपको उस लेवल पे ही सोचना पड़ेगा कि आप उसको अपने जो आपका जो ट्रामा है या जो अपनी चीज़ें हैं, जो अपने प्रॉब्लम्स आपकी लाइफ में चल रहे हैं, उसको लेके उसके साथ कभी भी प्रेजेंट नहीं होना होता है। हम लोग भी जब स्टार्ट करते हैं काम करना बच्चों के साथ, तो सबसे पहले 10 मिनट का एक आप चाहे उसको योगा बोलिए चाहे ध्यान बोलिए, वो ध्यान करते हैं कि सबसे पहले आपका जो भी घर का ट्रामा हुआ हो या कुछ भी रास्ते में ट्रामा हो, वो ट्रामा को आप रिड्यूस कर पाइए, सो दैट कि व्हाइल यू आर इंटरेक्टिंग विद द चिल्ड्रेन आप किसी भी पुरानी चीज़ को लेके इंटरेक्ट ना कर रहे हो। तो मेरे हिसाब से तो जब भी टीचर हैं, जो भी हमारे एजुकेटर्स हैं, उनको अपने आप के साथ थोड़ा काम करना चाहिए, अपने को शांत करना चाहिए, और शांत करके फिर इंटरेक्शन शुरू करना चाहिए बच्चों के साथ। तो दिस इज व्हाट वी आर डूइंग।
थैंक यू वैभव। Anand ji, as a lawyer or like in this room as a representative of the legal side of this whole conversation. What do you think are three actionable steps that you think legal bodies, lawyers can take to strengthen child safety?
ठीक, वेरी गुड क्वेश्चन. आई थिंक एक बहुत क्रिटिकल नीड है ये समझने की कि चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन सिस्टम की अपनी बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग लर्निंग्स हो गई हैं अभी तक. इन एजुकेशन वी हैव टू टेक दोज लर्निंग्स. एक बहुत की लर्निंग है जो एज ए लॉयर, एज ए पर्सन लुकिंग एट राइट्स, आई मस्ट प्रेजेंट हेयर इन दिस फोरम इज दैट द मोर यू फोकस ऑन सेफ्टी, देर इज मोर रिस्क ऑन राइट्स. दिल्ली हाई कोर्ट में ब्लास्ट हुआ, उसके बाद से दिल्ली हाई कोर्ट में लोगों की एंट्री मुश्किल हो गई. सफ़र करता है गरीब आदमी जिसके पास एक्सेस नहीं है, पैसा जिसके पास नहीं, जिसके पास बड़ा वकील नहीं है, वो 2-3 घंटे लाइन में लगता है. जब ब्लास्ट नहीं हुआ था एक्सेस आसान थी. जुवेनाइल बोर्ड में, दिल्ली के बोर्ड में एक बार एक वकील साहब बंदूक लेके घुस गए, एक्सेस ब्लॉक हो गई, सिक्योरिटी अप स्केल हो गई. सफ़र कौन करता है? गरीब लोग जो वहाँ बेनिफिशियरी हैं, उनकी एंट्री के लिए लाइनें लगती हैं. अब एक्स्ट्रा सिक्योरिटी गार्ड लग गए हैं. मेरा रिक्वेस्ट यही है कि जब हम एजुकेशन में इन सब्जेक्ट्स को समझ रहे हैं, एक बहुत कीन आई हम ज़रूर रखें कि हम जो भी सेफ्टी कंसर्न्स को एड्रेस कर रहे हैं, कोई भी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी स्टेक होल्डर्स पर इंक्रीज़ कर रहे हैं, जिसके राइट्स को हमें प्रोटेक्ट करना है, हम उसकी मुश्किलें ना बढ़ा दें. क्योंकि चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन सिस्टम में हम ऑलरेडी ये कर चुके हैं. राइट, इट्स अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट लर्निंग which also must be brought to the education system at a time when education and protection systems are converging. Right, तो हम यही रिकमेंडेशन देंगे कि जो लेवल प्लेइंग फील्ड है, जहाँ जैसे ही कोई प्रोटेक्शन की बात होती है तो सबसे पहले पेरेंट्स को लगता है मेरे बच्चे का स्कूल गया. राइट, अगर हमने बोला तो टीसी कटी, पहले होता था ना, हमारे यहाँ यूपी में टीसी कटी, आपने टीचर की शिकायत की, टीसी कटी. राइट राइट. अब तो खैर वो एजुकेशन लॉ में अमेंडमेंट करके वो टीसी को ही काट दिया गया, तो अब टीसी नहीं कटती. लेकिन जब तक टीसी थी तब तक टीसी कटने का सबसे बड़ा खौफ था. आप प्रिंसिपल की शिकायत करिए, टीसी कटी. राइट, तो यहाँ वो टीसी कटने वाली सिचुएशन ना आए. जो ऑलरेडी पावरफुल हैं, बजाय उनकी पावर हम इंक्रीज़ करें. all our interventions, designs, framing of laws and policies should be oriented and designed in a way जो कमज़ोर को ताकत दें, जो जिस स्पेस में वीक लोग हैं उनकी वल्नरेबिलिटीज़ को समझा जाए, उनको स्ट्रेंथन किया जाए लॉज में, उनके हाथ में ज़्यादा पावर रखी जाए, ताकि जो स्पेस है वहाँ पर पावर इम्बैलेंस जो है वो न्यूट्रलाइज हो. लोग पार्टिसिपेंट की तरह सेफ्टी पर बात करें, ना कि गिवर और रिसीवर या क्लेमेंट और दावेदार और पीड़ित के तौर पर. आई थिंक इसके लिए और डिटेल्स में बात करनी होगी, लेकिन थ्योरेटिकली आई कैन से दिस. सॉरी, आई डोंट 3 थिंग्स, आई ओनली वन.
No, thank you so much. I think that was, at least for me, a very insightful conversation. We have
I
about,
just wanted to say
yeah,
one thing in response to what you asked, Vaibhav. I don't think, as people who are in the business of trying to assist children, we have the luxury to feel traumatized. I mean, I'm sick and tired of people saying that, I feel traumatized. We don't have that luxury. So let's not get into that self-indulgent mode. There's a lot to do. In that context, I just wanted to read this to you because it struck me. It's called Good Bones by Maggie Smith. Life is short, though I keep this from my children. Life is short, and I have shortened mine in 1,000 delicious, ill-advised ways. 1,000 delicious, ill-advised ways I'll keep from my children. The world is at least 50% terrible, and that's a conservative estimate, though I keep this from my children. For every bird, there is a stone thrown at a bird. For every loved child, a child broken, bagged, sunk in a lake. Life is short, and the world is at least half terrible. And for every kind stranger, there is one who would break you, though I keep this from my children. I am trying to sell them the world. Any decent realtor walking you through a real shithole chirps on about good bones, this place could be beautiful, right? You could make this place beautiful. तो हम क्या इकोसिस्टम तैयार कर रहे हैं, ये प्रश्न हम आपसे पूछें. और जितनी भी चुनौतियां हैं और चुनौतियां रहेंगी, गोष्ठी शुरू होने से पहले मैं अनंत से ही कह रहा था, सिस्टम में डील करने से हम इतनी पिसते हैं. System is not always kind, and running Samvad as I do, straddled between the admin of Nimhans on the one hand and the ministry on the other, it's not easy. But we don't have the luxury to wallow in misery and this whole self narrative about how difficult things are. They will be difficult, but we have to strive on no matter what. And that's the point Anant was making when he started with how everyone can be horrified, but we hold on to that, put it in the back burner, and then carry on with what we need to do as an obligation.
This reminds me of this one line from Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from the jail, where he says that where he asks his fellow protesters that do not step out of the house if you know that you would retaliate when the police hits you with a stick. So till you are confident that you are not going to retaliate and you are going to be able to maintain your composure and continue peacefully, do not step out of your house. So I think that's the preparation that all of us need to do if you are to walk this path. School of Moderation tells us that you stop when a poem is read. Because that's how you end a panel. But I think we have 5 minutes. And again, as a non-profit founder, I milk every dollar and every minute. So I'm going to ask you all, if you have a question or two, please go ahead. We'll take 2 questions and then we'll just ask someone to respond very quickly. We have one there. Yeah, the mic's coming. If you could quickly also just tell your name and then mention your question.
My name is Mansi and I am the founder of Kids Talk Press and a conscious parenting coach. आप सबने बड़े अच्छे से बताया, but I think there was one piece which I think finally Vaibhav summed up. I was waiting for somebody to sum that up. कि whether it is the school, whether it's the government, whether it is a mental health educator, whether it is a lawyer, I think that one missing link with all the good work that you guys do is education of the parent. सब लोग बच्चों को प्रोटेक्ट कर रहे हैं पर कोई किसी को पेरेंटिंग नहीं सिखा रहा है. एंड to the extent that the parent is the one who's spending maximum amount of time with the child, he needs to notice the non-verbal stress, trauma that the child is going through, but उसे तो वो पता ही नहीं है कि उसे trauma कहते हैं, right? वो अपने आप, and like Vaibhav said, we need to rise above to identify our triggers as parents to understand कि बच्चे को क्या trigger कर रहा है. So I want to know to each one of you guys, and ma'am, you spoke beautifully of what a school should do to protect. How many times is the school communicating that back to the parent? These are your rights. This is what you should ask me. Because the parent is already overwhelmed with parenting, and now you're asking me to also take care of something which is a very large-scale event. So how can each one of you educate the parent so they know, as responsible adults and nurturers and caretakers of the child, that one, I am doing something wrong, and when an incident or accident happens, this is what are my child's rights, because this is unpublished data for an educated parent.
Okay, so I'll quickly paraphrase your question. What is one thing that we can do in our effort to sensitize parents in this direction? Does that?
Yes, sensitize and educate.
And educate. Okay, okay. Thank you. One more question. I think we have a couple of hands here. So, yeah.
I don't think so. I need this because I am a teacher.
Okay.
Teacher's voice are pretty high.
It's been
They are pretty
recorded.
loud.
It gets recorded, so it's.
It's been recorded, use it.
Okay.
Actually, it's not.
I'm a teacher of SRF Vidyalay, which is for underprivileged children. As you said that kids doesn't know what they are going through, I think they are very, very well aware because I am a mother teacher of LKG students who are like 4 to 5, maximum 6 years of age. In my 2 years experience, there are so many kids who have stood up in front of me and said, "Ma'am, पता है मेरे मम्मी को ना मेरे पापा बेल्ट से मारते हैं और पता है आज मम्मी ना सुबह उठ नहीं पाई एंड शी कुडंट मेक एनी फूड फॉर मी तो मेरे को आज पापा ने चिप्स दे दिए." So these are the things which they discuss with me because I am pretty close to them, and I always tell, the moment I enter the class, I always tell ki I am your 3 hours mother. If you have anything, please share with me. I'll be your friend. Share करते हैं, but being a teacher, I just hug them. I'm sorry, but I don't know how to deal with them because they are too small. I can give them good touch, bad touch. I can teach them academics. I can teach them everything. But I cannot teach them how to deal with your own parents, जहाँ पे वो बेचारे आके मुझसे शेयर करते हैं, but they don't know how to share with their parents. अपनी मम्मी को नहीं बोल सकते कि मम्मा कैसे मार खा लेते हो आप, बोलो ना पापा को stop. So I really need, you were talking about do's and don'ts of a parent. I think the same question, please help me कि मैं क्या सिखाऊं पेरेंट्स को कि they should come out of their shell because underprivileged है, उनकी instincts ही ऐसे होते हैं कि या तो बुली बनो, मारो और जिंदा रहो. So वो, how should I help them?
Thank you for the question. I think जो सवाल आपने पूछा है and it's somehow connected to the question that you've also asked, but I think there are so many more layers into this piece that I think I don't think we'll have all the time and necessary to respond to that. But I think what we can do maybe is we'll break for tea right now. So I'd request you to please, like both of you, to grab one of them and talk about this because
That's metaphorically.
yeah. So yes, yeah.
So it's not a question, but one of the ideas for strengthening institutional readiness. We're talking about parents here.
Yeah.
So now, the first change we need to make as an institution, anyone, it could be schools, it could be NGOs, it could be us, it could be teachers, trainers, it could be parenting trainers. If you really look at it, the underlying theme when we talk about parents from an outside parent perspective, if you notice, there's a blame underneath. Parents don't know. Parents गलत करते हैं. सबसे पहले ना ये शिफ्ट करना पड़ेगा यहाँ पे, क्योंकि जब तक आप किसी को ब्लेम कर रहे हो ना, आपको ना सुनेगा नहीं. Parents want the best for their child is a given fact. They don't know how to. That could be a measure. If I don't know cycling, I'm not a bad person. I just don't know how to cycle. उसको साइकिल नहीं आती, वहाँ से स्टार्ट करोगे ना तो सुनेंगे ही नहीं. So the first change which needs to happen at the institution level is to stop blaming the parent. Underline ना हर के बारे में ना बीच में से ब्लेम निकल रहा है, वो ब्लेम हटाना पड़ेगा. This will be the first step. उसके ऊपर बहुत सारा काम करना.
Yeah. No, agree. And I think as a teacher educator, that is my submission when you work with teachers, क्योंकि हमेशा वो हो जाता है कि टीचर को नहीं आता है, टीचर्स ऐसे करते हैं, टीचर्स वो है. But I always keep saying that exactly. And like every morning teachers don't wake up thinking कि चलो आज जाके पीटेंगे किसी बच्चे को, right? But and how do we really start from there? I think wonderful note to close this panel on. Poem. Okay. So yeah.
She also wanted to say.
I think you can share what you wanted to say, and then Shalini has a story, and we'll close.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nikita Tulsian. I'm actually a trustee on missing. And the one thing that really strikes me about missing when I personally look at it is when Lena stresses on the fact that we are working on prevention, not just tackling child abuse, but how we can make the children aware and work on prevention. And just this morning, when I was coming here, I'm on a chat group in Delhi, on a WhatsApp group of a lot of people in one of the areas. And this incident probably has just occurred in the last 2 days. You'll be aware of it. Uh, it's new to me, where the predator is another student. So while everybody is working on people from outside, vendors, this that, this is so shocking that a 5-year-old has got abused by a 19-year-old student. I don't know if you've read about it. So so many things are being taken care of. Who and what has gone wrong here? Is the child not aware? Yeah, or I just wanted to understand, from all the experts sitting here, that how is this taken care of? This is RM Mangalam school.
I'd be happy to respond. It's a very long response. I'll be
हाँ,
able to
so
do it in
Short.
personally करेंगे. Okay, I'll just try to put a personal story to this, and I hope I'll connect all the dots which people have asked from a very parent perspective. My husband is a lawyer, so we also know a lot of things with related to law. And in a school, my daughter and her friends were abused by their classmates, and they are all in the age group of 12, 13, 14. And we actually wanted again. So what happens is that when you ask the school that why it happened, what is this response mechanism, everybody goes on to a very defense mode. And also we were dealing with a very, very powerful institution. And the moment it happened, the first thing that happened was that other two girls were convinced that it was not a abuse. So they backed out. The FIR went, actually should have gone from the school side, went from my daughter's side, which itself is a problematic thing in terms of legal aspect. And we fought a legal battle of almost 5 years, and both at the lower court and the high court. And what we got after all that 5 years was that an apology from the boys, which is what my daughter wanted from the day one, because she wanted everybody to know that it was their fault. They did this, they blackmailed everybody, all the 3 girls. And end of the day, if you have to go through a legal battle of 5 years to get an apology, there is definitely something wrong. In the sense of institutions, in the sense of what children understand from each other, whether there was no empathy, whether the boys understood that, it is chalega, because we have the backing of the most powerful institution, so it is all right. So there is lot of thing in that package, as a parent, as an institution, as a legal battle. Whether everybody will actually go for a 5-year legal battle is also something very difficult to guess. The only thing that we did as a parent was to stand by our child, because she said, I am not giving up. I am going to stand by my whole story, and I am going to say this thing, let it take even 10 years. So, end of the day, when the apology came, as I was speaking to Sangeeta about it in another online virtual meeting, is that I really don't know that whether the apology was really the apology, okay? So, because it was something that you have to do it now, it has come to that stage, so the boys apologized. The whole judgment actually told the boys to go, because we asked the judge to send the boys for the counseling. My daughter went through a lot of support system in last 3 years for that. She had to really struggle. She dropped out of the school. She is now a private candidate and giving her 12th. And she is a very brave child, for that matter. I mean to say, I'm very proud of it, that, how she stood by it. And in that thing, we asked the judge to send them for counseling. Now, that is where the counseling part of, the trauma part of it comes. Because we thought that if our child has gone through so much of trauma, the boys also would have gone through so much of trauma with dealing with this. So they were asked to go to Jipmar. Now, that is where the surprise is. He is the head of the psychiatry department, where actually the case went to. And the whole thing that happened in that whole process was because it was a legal compliance. So they said, yes, the counseling is done. No details were ever submitted. No, nothing ever submitted. What happened? So it was actually, the boys never went for any counseling. So it is their loss. That is what I feel. But in that whole process is what we understood as that then when you go into this whole mode, everybody becomes very defensive. The the institution, the school, the JIPMAR, even the judges, they also go into defensive mode. So it's a very tricky thing in terms of who is parents are. I mean to say, we were very well educated to fight it for 5 years, but still I think it is not to do with the legal education also. At times it is about resilience. So it is completely different.
It's also about privilege.
Yes.
I fear class,
Yeah.
so many things here.
Yeah.
I think it's abuse and the abuse.
I think that is what I said, that it is about the power dynamics. I think it is sometimes the other way around, and it is all about power dynamics. Who is powerful at that point of time?
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you everyone for being so patient, and a big round of applause for all our panelists here. And with that, we'll close this panel.